So a little bit different kind of a video for me today. I'm just going to talk about a film, 1972 Solaris by Tarkovsky there. And I'm going to talk about it because I watch so many movies and so few of them kind of just stick with you. You know, it's been a few years since I watched Stalker and that movie stuck with me. And this movie is very similar in a lot of ways. You know, there's a lot going on. It's somewhat open to interpretation, what you're going to get out of it. I think that's what a lot of good art is. You know, it's kind of open to the viewer interacting with it and interpreting it and thinking about it, and that's definitely what this film is. Now, it's a little slow paced, especially at the beginning, the first 40 minutes or so. Could probably be tightened up, but I think that's just kind of a Tarkovsky thing, maybe a Russian film thing. I don't know, I haven't seen like a ton of Russian films, but it is kind of a different mentality. Those Russians have a different kind of a life experience. Anyway, to me, this is my interpretation, and again, no interpretations are wrong in art, I don't think. Even if you totally miss what the director, filmmaker, whoever was going out to say, you derive whatever value you get out of it, and that in and of itself is valuable. But you have three scientists on a space station, or I guess it's orbiting a planet, or it's, you know, right near the surface or whatever, who really gives a shit. But on this planet, there's I'm not gonna say alien consciousness, but maybe it's more like what David Lynch talks about. If you've ever heard David Lynch talk about the sea of consciousness, how all life, all thought kind of just emerges from this same place. We're all individuals, but we're all kind of sharing the same wavelengths, sharing the same basic materials of life. And I think that's really what Lynch is trying to say when he talks about it, maybe what this film's trying to say, in the sense that every person, every experience, where does it come from, where does it go? Can you bring back experiences, memories? Are memories false? How true is a memory? Could a memory be even more true than your lived experience of it way back in the past? And these are kind of the questions and concerns this movie addresses, which is pretty fucking interesting, I think. But anyway, you have the main character, Chris, and he goes to the space station. There's three scientists there, left from 80 or whatever. The beginning of the movie kind of explains this. Not really that important, I don't think, but you have three left, and kind of like in Stalker, I think each person kind of represents a different section of humanity. You know, you have Sartorius, which is more the straight analytical scientists. Then the main characters maybe a little bit more emotional, maybe a little bit more passionate. They're all scientists, so it's a little less clear cut than when you watch Stalker, but there's still some deviation there. And then you have the older scientist. I'm not like 100% sure what he's supposed to represent. If you really want to go thinking deep about this movie, he's just representing different aspects of the same person, maybe, if not humanity, but whatever, you don't need to go that deep into it. But he comes aboard the space station, and whatever's living on the planet, I wouldn't even say living, but whatever exists there, let's call it the alien consciousness, you know, I think they're trying to communicate with humanity, with the scientists on board the space station. And the only real way they know how to do that, because they have no concept of humanity or human consciousness, is to kind of go into people's thoughts and read their memories and then try to re-experience that. That's my interpretation of this whole movie. The alien consciousness comes back as Chris's, the main character, his wife, and it's like a reinterpretation of those memories. She appears once, he sends her away, she comes again. You know, maybe there's something there about every time you remember someone, what are you really remembering? You know, what aspect of them? Because humans are complex creatures, and memory is fallible, so you're going to remember the best parts, the worst parts. The complete person to remember all at once is kind of impossible, but, you know. And then from the aliens' perspective, I think the whole reason that they're doing this is because if you were an alien consciousness, alone on a planet, didn't have any understanding of humanity, maybe weren't even a fully formed consciousness yourself, maybe just like energy or whatever, and you wanted to experience consciousness, you wanted to experience life, and these humans come along and they try to communicate. You do experiments, radiation, whatever the scientific gobbledygook is in this movie, who cares? It's not important. But if you're gonna go through the trouble of doing all that, you'd probably want to do it to try and experience the most interesting things, which is human emotion and love and grief and all these parts of being a human that I think an alien would find interesting if they didn't evolve all these things themselves. And again, I don't think we're talking about a life form in this movie. I think we're just talking about some kind of the sea of consciousness, some kind of weird, vague energy. Anyway, maybe the alien tries to do that with the first scientist who, before the main character even gets there, he kills himself. Maybe it was too much for the person to have to go through all that and experience that. And then you have the serious scientist, Sartorius. You're not getting half of these emotions out of that guy because he's a very rational man. At some point, a little person even runs out as his manifestation of the consciousness. You know, like a man-child. It's a bit on the nose, but I think that's what that's supposed to represent, trying to, you know, run out of the room and experience things, and the rational scientist just kind of knocks it back. The older scientist, you don't really see too much of his manifestation. He's probably too far removed from whatever youthful infatuations he had, whatever love he should, you know, he's an older, I think they say he's like 57. He looks a little older than that, but. And then Chris comes along. He's kind of like the perfect specimen for this alien consciousness to experience love and all these things with. So his wife comes back, and it's, you know, it's all the things you think it would be. It's sad, it's tragic. He kind of falls in love with her, even though he knows it's not really her, that kind of thing. But again, man, like, if someone's there and you're experienced the smell and the taste and the sight of somebody you used to love, what's the difference between memory and reality, really? But especially when it's manifesting itself right there in your face, you know. So a bit of a sympathetic character. Watching this with subtitles, it's always kind of hard to get like a complete sense of the acting and everything because you got to read the subtitles, so that kind of sucks. I'm not gonna learn Russian, but you know, is a little bit of a limitation when you're watching like a foreign film, I think. But you know, he goes through this whole process, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful movie. You go to the beginning, and there are things that come back. Basically, they go through all this stuff with the alien consciousness with his wife. At some point, he gets a fever, and I think the alien consciousness turns into the memory of his mother taking care of him, because why wouldn't you know? You know, that's a different kind of love, the love a mother has for a son than like a romantic, tragic love a man might have for his deceased wife who, boilers, killed herself. But the point is, ultimately, the alien consciousness, I think, pushes the man to his breaking point and has their fill, understands humanity as much as it's going to understand it from this one person, and decides to either go back to the planet or ask the other scientists to like use radiation to kill it or something. I don't really understand what's going on there, but it's gone. And then the man has to choose and decide whether he's going to go back to Earth and live his earthly life. I was reading a little bit about it on Reddit. Somebody said he would go back, and because of time dilation and stuff, things would be much different. So there probably wouldn't be much for him to go back to. I don't think that's probably true to the extent of the logic that exists in this film, because it seems like, you know, he knows that there's only 3 scientists left. He gets there, he kind of never got the note that the one guy killed himself. So some time has passed, but I don't think it's like years that passed traveling to this planet. Maybe not, but the point is the man has to choose between going back to Earth, or suddenly there's these little islands that are popping up on the alien planet. So maybe he goes back there. That's one interpretation of the ending. He goes back, or he doesn't go back to Earth, but he goes to the planet, and he goes to one of these islands, which is just an island of comfortable memory between him and his father, I suppose. I don't really like to interpret it that way. I kind of think that these little islands are just manifestations of the man's consciousness, and they're kind of just sprouting up, just like the idea of the sea of consciousness and emergence. You know, where does where does it all come from? Human thought, human consciousness. It comes from experience. And as humans, we have the experience of not only our own lives, but through the lens of art and literature and all these other things, we get to experience other people's thoughts and lives, and it's kind of all a swirling sea. Ideas pop up. That's kind of where it's all coming from. You know, everything influences everything else. And I kind of like the idea of just alien consciousness kind of gleaning a little bit of humanity and forming these little islands. And you could say that the memory is not quite the same as it should be. You know, in the beginning we see rain coming down on the man, and then at the end it's that same memory but interpreted a different way, with the rain coming down inside the house. And you could say that the man's misremembering that. Obviously the alien consciousness is misremembering that, or it's forming something new. It's forming something a little bit more poetic, a little bit more beautiful, a little bit more cinematic in this case. But you know, it's not a one-to-one memory. It's something taking someone else's experience and forming something new. And that's kind of the interesting thing of life in this whole movie, I think. You know, taking all these little bits and pieces and turning them into something new. As far as the cinematography goes, it's pretty good, I guess. You know, there's a lot of like 1970s style zooms, and there's some interesting blocking where the characters are really just moving around this little tiny set they built. I guess it's not so tiny, but you know, you're restricted to, most of the movie takes place on this one set. It's very circular. It's very much like a tunnel, which is also a thing in Stalker. I don't know, I guess that could maybe represent birth and the circle of life and all that stuff. Whatever you want to read into it. Tarkovsky seems to like his tunnels. I'm definitely gonna watch all his other movies now, just because I watched two and you know, they were pretty good. I liked them. The sets themselves are, you know, pretty decent. The beginning part, again, is really slow. There's a whole 10 minutes where a different character, one of the first people to be on the space station, or a pilot or some crap, I don't know. Anyway, he's like driving on Russian freeways and through Russian tunnels, and it goes on for like 5 or 10 minutes, and it's kind of, you know, I have to go back and see what that's really adding to the movie, but 45 minutes in, I actually just wanted to turn this off, and my wife was like, let's finish what we started. And so I'm glad that we did. I'm glad we watched it, but man, those first 40 minutes, they're pretty, it's a pretty slow pace. But then after that, I think the movie gets real good. You know, if the movie would have started on the space station, or maybe just like the first 10 minutes could have been him at his parents' house talking to his dad, talking to this ex-pilot, but just speed that the hell up, you know. I think this movie could have been like a little bit of a masterpiece. As it is, it's really, really good, but I give it like a 4 out of 5. I can't give it like a 5 out of 5 just because it's so slow paced at that beginning. Definitely a good movie though. Like, that's very rare for me to give a movie a 4 out of 5. It has to be really, really good. And then like a 5 out of 5 would just be like a masterpiece, like There Will Be Blood or something like that, you know, where it's just like almost a perfect movie. Because no art's perfect, but you can get close enough in a sense to where, you know, what does perfect mean? You know, it's just a stupid term. It's a set of rules, criteria something has to meet. And if something's really good, it's going to be breaking at least a few criteria and a few rules. So that's Solaris, 1972 Tarkovsky film. I think it's on YouTube. You can go watch it right now if you want. I think we watched it on HBO Max, so it's on there right now, but streaming's bullshit. A month from now, it probably won't be. All the acting seems to be pretty good. One problem with the Tarkovsky films is like there'll be like stretches of the movie where they just kind of start talking about philosophy and you know, art versus science. You really get that in Stalker, and it's fine. It just it does get to be slightly, maybe a little bit too on the nose if you're really going for like that art for art's sake kind of. Now you got to think about it, kind of interpretation. But I'm not gonna fault the movie for that, because too many films are about nothing. You talk about nothing. You try to say nothing. Huh? If you go for that in a film, and even if it comes out, you know, slightly stilted, you at least went for it, and you made a film that's worth thinking about and talking about, and that people can appreciate, like me, decades later, you know. Yeah, pretty good movie. Go ahead and give it a watch, you know. It's a lot better than most of the crap that comes out these days.